Good morning. A happy post-Purim to you all. We find ourselves in the end of chapter 10. Chapter 10, the Alter Rebbe devotes to describing the 2 degrees of tzaddik. Degree number 1 of tzaddik that the Alter Rebbe described for us is the tzaddik who is known as incomplete. Why is he incomplete? Hold that thought. The tzaddik is also known as tzaddik vera loy, a tzaddik who has evil to him. The Gemara intends to say that it's a tzaddik whose life is difficult, a tzaddik to whom evil transpires. Why does evil transpire to this tzaddik? And what does it mean? What's the deeper meaning of the statement that this is a tzaddik who has evil to him? And how does this compare to the perfect tzaddik, who is known as the complete tzaddik? Why is he called complete, and the other tzaddik is called incomplete? And why, as the Gemara describes him as the tzaddik for whom it is good, or the tzaddik who has goodness to him, why is his life always good? And why? And what is the deeper meaning of the statement that this tzaddik has goodness to him? And then at the end, the Alter Rebbe introduced us to a new title for the tzaddik gomer, for the complete tzaddik. He says the tzaddik gomer is also known as bnei aliyah, a person of elevation, an elevated person. Well, the questions can be answered this way. What is the inner dynamic of a human being? You have a soul that is from Klipa, that is host to a soul that comes from Hashem, that is a piece of Hashem. And the two of them are battling it out for control over the body's expression. Each one wants the thoughts to be her thoughts. Each one wants the speech to be her speech. Each one wants the activities to be her activities. Each one wants the emotions to reflect her feelings, her wants, her desires. And in the tzaddik of any degree, the love for Hashem that has been developed by this person is so intense that either it has silenced the voice of the animal soul, or it has transformed the animal soul entirely so that the animal soul also wants what the divine soul wants, to be connected to Hashem. So now we can answer all the questions we listed above. What does it mean that the tzaddik is complete or that the tzaddik is incomplete? The answer is the tzaddik's love for Hashem complete, or is the tzaddik's love for Hashem incomplete? The explanation is as follows. A tzaddik who has an animal soul that is silent, that doesn't interfere, but has not yet been transformed into a lover of God, this tzaddik's love for Hashem is not yet complete. There still is an element in the soul and the inner dynamic of this tzaddik that does not love Hashem. What is the result of not loving Hashem fully? It means that the unholiness of the world, the klipa, the impurity, is not despised and hated and repulsed completely. Because exactly commensurate to the love you have for Hashem will be your repulsion for evil. In this way, in this manner, this tzaddik is known either as complete or incomplete, because his love for Hashem will be complete or incomplete. And based on his love for Hashem, his hatred and disgust for evil will be complete or incomplete. This is what makes a tzaddik a complete tzaddik, tzaddik gomor, or an incomplete tzaddik, tzaddik she'enoi gomor. That's the language of the Talmud. With this in mind, we can also answer the question, what does it mean when a tzaddik has a hard life? And what does it mean when a tzaddik has a good life? A tzaddik who has evil to him, just like every human being that has evil to them, will require cleansing, either in this world or in the world to come. Therefore, the Gemara suggests that a tzaddik who suffers is going through his cleansing process in this world so that Hashem, in his kindness, can spare him the immeasurably more intense and more painful cleansing of the world to come. And that's why a tzaddik who has even a smidgen, I don't know what the word is, smidge or smidgen of evil to him, goes through some challenges, some hardship in this world as his cleansing, as the atonement for his soul, for just being from klipa, so that when he comes to the world to come, the world of souls, there is no cleansing necessary. He could go straight to his reward in the hereafter. Whereas a perfect tzaddik needs no cleansing whatsoever. And therefore, there's no reason for him to suffer at all. That is not to say that in real life, perfect tzaddikim don't suffer. Why? Because in the way it's translated into reality, the perfect tzaddik represents the generation, and what we do to our perfect tzaddikim is unspeakable. The tzaddik suffers for his generation. If the generation is worthy, the tzaddik doesn't suffer. If the generation is unworthy, then Rahman al-Islam, the tzaddik will take the brunt of it because he is the representative from Shamayim to us. As we have the story from I don't recall, it's in the Maimer Basi Lagani, if it was the Mittler Rebbe or the Rebbe Maharash. I believe it was the Mittler Rebbe, the second Rebbe of Lubavitch, who showed one of his Hasidim. The Chassid came in and poured out his heart to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe rolled up his sleeve and showed how the flesh on his arm was all shriveled and sunken. And the Rebbe says, I suffer physically because of your pain. I'm suffering physically because of you. The Rebbe was not complaining. The Rebbe was informing. The bond that the Rebbe has to the person is so deep. The bond that the perfect tzaddik has with his generation is so deep that the tzaddik feels the pain of the people sometimes more so than the person feels their own pain. Rabbi Shmuel Kaplan tells a story that one time he was the intermediary, the middleman in a conversation between a young lady and the Rebbe. And the young lady was complaining about hardships in her life, true hardships, nothing to sniff at. And the Rebbe had responded to her in a letter saying, I feel your pain. This is on a video called Sensitivity. She responds, you couldn't possibly. And perhaps she was a little insulted that somebody would even suggest that they know what she's going through. And so the Rebbe responds to her, I suppose through Rabbi Kaplan. After a while, we'll find the video, we'll play the video just to make sure that we're getting it correct. That the Rebbe responds to her that when a child has a toothache, the mother feels more pain than the child himself is feeling. Yeah, the mother is in more agony than the child is in agony. The child feels a toothache. The mother is hurting from her head to her toes because her baby is suffering. Says the Rebbe, that's how I feel about you. Every Jew in the generation is my only child, and when my children are in pain, They only feel the pain that they're suffering, and only in the limb or in the area of life that they're suffering in. I feel it from my head to my toe. Not in those words, obviously. But this is the tzaddik who is perfect. And the role of the tzaddik who is perfect is that they often are the representative for the generation, and therefore, although they deserve no suffering because of what they have done, nevertheless, painful things happen to them because of the circumstances of the world. For example, we've discussed this before. The Talmud lists 4 people who died, and then throughout the years, there have been more people added to that list. People who died only because humans have to die. And the way that the Talmud describes it is, they died by the bite of the snake. What snake? They were bit by a snake? No, they weren't bit by a snake. What happened was that in the Garden of Eden, there once was a snake, and that snake infused his poison into humanity by debating with Chava and convincing her to do something wrong, eating from the tree. And because of the influence of the snake, evil was mixed into everything in this world, and therefore everything in this world has to die in order for it to eventually receive its, in order for it to eventually reach a point of actual purity. Human beings have to die. Why? Because the snake infused evil into everything that exists. These people were righteous to the degree that they did not deserve to die. They had done nothing that should cause them, their lives to end. They were righteous. The only reason they died is because the environment in which they live, meaning this physical world, which is a mixture of good and evil, requires that people die. That is, pardon me. That's the perfect tzaddik, whom the Talmud describes as a tzaddik whose life is good. A tzaddik whose life is good, generally we understand it is because he does not require any cleansing. A tzaddik, a righteous person who suffers during his lifetime, we understand it that Hashem in his kindness is allowing him to go through his cleansing and purification process here in the world, which is infinitely easier than the cleansing process of the world to come. And still, knowing all of this, it's important to note that we must not sit in judgment about any person, because we don't know nothing. We have no idea what's happening in the life of another person, and to sit in judgment about another person, not only is it arrogant, it's downright foolish, and we shouldn't do that. Here we are just learning information, so that we can get to know ourselves better. This being said, let's go back to the titles of the 2 tzaddikim. So we have a tzaddik who is perfect. That means his love for Hashem is perfect. We have a tzaddik who's not perfect, because his love for Hashem is not perfect. That's why he's called the tzaddik who is complete and the tzaddik who is not complete. Then we have the tzaddik who has some remnant of evil left in him because his love for Hashem is not complete. If his love for Hashem is complete, he will have transformed any vestige of evil that was within him into a force for holiness. He would have transformed his animal soul that was involved previously in self-love and self-adoration and self-indulgence. He would have transformed it into a lover of God who would serve Hashem with all of its art and all of its soul and all of its might, out of its pure love and passion for Hashem. Talking about the animal soul in a perfect tzaddik. There would be no evil left in him, because of the absolute and complete love that this tzaddik has for Hashem. But when you have a tzaddik whose love for Hashem is not complete, when you have a tzaddik whose love for Hashem is just strong enough to silence the animal soul, but not to transform it, this is a tzaddik who still has evil to him. That means the animal soul is still self-indulgent. He just never gets a chance to speak. The animal soul still adores itself. It just never has any chance to act on that. The animal soul still is interested in self-indulgence, just never gets an opportunity to control the gears of the body and determine what the body should do. how the body should act. But is it still involved in its own self? Is its priority still self? Absolutely. Absolutely silent, but absolutely self-oriented still. And that in Tanya, that in Torah is the epitome of evil. I'm focused on me instead of Hashem. Therefore,
I have a question.
okay, let me finish the thought and then I'll take the question. Therefore, this tzaddik whose love for Hashem is not complete means he has a soul in him who is self-oriented, and that means evil. Even though it would appear when you looked at him, or when the tzaddik looks at himself, he wouldn't see any expression of evil because that evil is absolutely subdued, absolutely under the tzaddik's control, but it is still there. This tzaddik, you could call him a tzaddik who has evil to him. And the Alter Rebbe adds, this is a tzaddik who has evil in him, but this evil is absolutely nullified to him and subjugated to him. That's why he's called tzaddik vera loy. He's a tzaddik who has evil, but that evil is his. He's got it under control. Yes, Randy.
So the tzaddik that has evil in him, you said that he doesn't do evil, but he doesn't have an opportunity also. So how is that a tzaddik?
Well, the tzaddik is different than the Beinoni, in that the Beinoni hears the call of the Yetzer Hara. The Beinoni hears the wishes of the Yetzer Hara and chooses not to respond to them. The tzaddik doesn't even hear. The Yetzer Hara and the tzaddik is absolutely silent, never voices his opinion. That's the difference. A perfect tzaddik doesn't have any evil in him. The imperfect tzaddik has evil in him, but it never speaks. The Beinoni has a very verbal bad side to them, and they are constantly fighting the battle, and they're constantly succeeding. That's why they're called Beinoni. There's nothing unique about this person. They're just average, but they are tremendously successfully average. They have reached the ultimate. They've reached the pinnacle of success for an average human being. The average human being has a good side and a bad side, but a successful average human being is constantly doing the right thing, even though they hear very loudly in their ear the call of the Yetzer Hara to do self-indulgent things.
So it never passes a tzaddik's mind, anything.
Correct. Correct. And that's how one might know whether or not they are a tzaddik. If you want to know whether or not you are a tzaddik, then think about this. When you're in the middle of preparing the challenge for Shabbos, what comes in your mind? Only thoughts about Torah and mitzvahs, or perhaps something else, This is how one might know.
Thank you.
And that does not mean that one should feel down about themselves because they realize that they're a Beinoni. Being a Beinoni is a privilege. Being a Beinoni might be the reason why Hashem created the world is for the Beinoni. The tzaddik is here as a guide, as an inspiration. But as we said previously, there are two kinds of delights for Hashem. There is the delight of the sweet, meaning there's nothing bitter or sharp about this. And then there's the delight of the savory, where it's bitter transformed into sweet. That's the life of the Beinoni.
So that also reminds me, there's a person can think of bad things in other people and realize you understand it. So it made me think that you were saying that that's an evil in itself.
To see evil things in other people?
No, that you understand them, that you see, not just to see it, but to see it and understand that it's there.
Well, I don't know. We have tzaddikim, we have stories of tzaddikim who were clearly able to see the evil in people, and we have stories of tzaddikim who were completely unable to see any evil in people.
And they're both tzaddiks.
And they're both called tzaddik. So I don't know how to apply the principle that you just described. how to label it good or evil. But when we see evil in other people, our job is either stop looking, that's option A, or help if we can, and obviously to take a moral lesson from the fact that you saw this evil in another person. This the Baal Shem Tov taught us, that if you see something, that everything you see in the world is meant to be a lesson for you and how you serve Hashem. So if a person sees something negative in another person, it's obviously Hashem showing you something that you need to know for your own service of Hashem.
Even if it's not like a personal person that you know?
So the examples, I'll give 2 examples, and from there you'll have to build out the rest of it as you review the subject in your mind over the next week. We have a story where a Rebbe from Lubavitch, again, I don't remember which one because this is off the cuff, was visited in Yechidus, a private audience, by a chassid, by a Jew who had done something very sinful. And he was trying to do a tshuva for that sin. And he had come to the Rebbe so that the Rebbe could advise him on a proper path of tshuva, which in the vernacular is called, he came to ask for a tikkun, a way of rectifying the sin. And the Rebbe sent him out of the room without giving him an answer. And the Rebbe sat by himself for a very long time. And then after a very long time, the Rebbe called the man back in and gave him the answer. And then the Rebbe explained to his gabbai, or to his children, that in order for a tzaddik to give a tikkun to a fellow Jew, first he has to find within himself some defect, some fault that is similar to what the other Jew is experiencing, correct it in himself, and then he can offer that as a solution to the other Jew. But when this guy came in, the sin that he had committed was of a certain character that the Rebbe could not find anything in himself that was even close. And therefore the Rebbe couldn't fix that problem in himself, and therefore the Rebbe couldn't help this man find a way to fix the sin in his life. So the Rebbe looked and looked and looked, and he searched his soul till he found something that was similar and corrected it in himself, and then called the man back in. So that's one example. The other example is scoffers from the Baal Shem Tov. That's one version of the story. The other version of the story, the way I heard, is that students of the Baal Shem Tov were traveling and they saw a religious group carving a religious symbol out of ice, out of a frozen lake, a very large religious symbol. And they came to the Baal Shem Tov and they said, if it was the scoffers, they were challenging. And if it was the students, they were asking, what are we supposed to learn for Avodas Hashem from the fact that we saw a great big celebration around carving a religious symbol out of ice?
A non-Jewish religious symbol.
Right. And the Baal Shem Tov told them that coldness in your Judaism and heresy are just a thin line apart from each other. Sometimes you could get so cold that you could turn into a heretic. Coldness could turn into heresy. That's the moral of the story. What do we see from these 2 examples? From these 2 examples, we see a guy came to visit the Rebbe, and the Rebbe had to learn from him something. The man came to the Rebbe to confess a sin and ask for help, and the Rebbe had to learn something from him. How to improve. The Rebbe had to improve his own service of Hashem because he met with this guy. And then the Jewish people saw something that's absolutely foreign to the life of a Jew, and still they had to learn something from it for Avodas Hashem. From here, you could build a principle and apply it as you will. Anyway, that's the story. Thank you for the question. That's the story of these two tzaddikim. But then we have the new title that the Alter Rebbe introduced us to about the perfect tzaddik. We said the perfect tzaddik is called Ben Aliyah, an elevated Jew. Why is he called elevated? So last week we learned that this is because the tzaddik has succeeded in taking all of the evil that was within him and elevating it to holiness. Even his animal soul has been elevated and transformed into a lover of God. It has been elevated to the camp of holiness. That's why he's called Bnei Aliyah. And today we will learn another reason why they are called Bnei Aliyah. The previous reason that we learned was in the realm of avoiding evil, as the Alter Rebbe actually describes in today's Tanya. Today is the 19th of the second Adar, Yud Tes Adar Sheni. And in today's Tanya, the Alter Rebbe writes that you can elevate or you can protect, defend your soul from impurity. You could defend your animal soul and your body and your portion of this physical world from impurity by avoiding the 365 prohibitions of the Torah. And this tzaddik has done so. This tzaddik has, by observing all the prohibitions of Torah to the farthest degree, this tzaddik has defended his soul and his body from unholiness. But more so, obviously, because we're talking about a tzaddik, this tzaddik has transformed his animal soul so that it no longer desires evil. Now it only wants holiness. That is in the realm of sur meira, avoiding evil. Now the Alter Rebbe gives us a reason why to call a tzaddik b'nei aliyah, an elevated person, from in the realm of doing good, asay tov. Another way to say it is, and you'll help me with language if you have a better idea of how to say this in a plain English, the negative energy and the positive energy. Every person has negative energy and positive energy. And negative doesn't mean bad. Negative means to push away. And positive energy doesn't mean necessarily good. Positive energy means you pull it towards you, like the magnets. So the tzaddik has pushed evil away from himself. That's his negative energy. He has pushed away all the evil from himself, and that's fantastic. Now the tzaddik also has positive energy, and he's pulling holiness. But the tzaddik, who is perfect and complete in his righteousness, who is perfect and complete in his love for Hashem, who is perfect and complete in his purity and holiness, pulls holiness to himself in a unique and special way. So let's read the Tanya. We are towards the end of chapter 10. And there are, towards the end of one of the lines on this page, there are two dots, and the last word on the line is ve'oid. Ve'oid. And another reason to call the tzaddik b'nei aliyah, ve'oid nikreim b'nei aliyah, they are called elevated people, mipnei, because shegam avoidasam, even their service of Hashem b'vchinas v'asei tov, in their positive energy realm, in what they're doing, not just what they are avoiding, namely, b'kiyum haTorah u'mitzvayseha, in the fulfillment of Torah study and mitzvahs, they do this, these perfect tzaddikim, they do it in a unique and special way. Who it is done, l'tzoyrech gavoiha, for the sake of the Ibishter, the one that is on high, u'maylo maylo adreim hamaylos, higher, higher, and even higher to the highest, till the highest level. That means, let's try to understand a little bit of the context, the actual meaning of this statement, and then we'll try to dig in and understand a little Kabbalah, but not too much. Sometimes a person serves God because it makes them happy. Is that bad? That is far from bad. Is it perfect? It's far from perfect. It's good. Sometimes a person has a neshama that thirsts for holiness. And so they get involved in Torah study to quench that thirst. Is that bad? That's the opposite of bad. Is it perfect? Well, it ain't perfect. Sometimes a person feels an overwhelming love for their children. Yeah. And so in order to give expression to that love, they do something for their children that has absolutely no use and no benefit to themselves. Yeah. And by doing so, they're able to be relieved of this heart-bursting feeling of love for the children. Is that good? I'm sorry, is that bad? No, that's the farthest thing from bad. Is it perfect? For a parent, it's pretty darn perfect. Yeah. For a servant of Hashem, for a child, for a spouse, it's not perfect. We'll break it down. We'll break it down. When it comes to a spousal relationship, or when it comes to a child-parent relationship, perfection is you do what the other needs with no consideration of your own needs. And we're not talking about chas v'shalom. Obviously, we're not talking about an abusive situation. We're not talking about a situation where one party is taking advantage of another. We're talking about a good and balanced situation. You do for the other what the other needs with no consideration for yourself, of your needs. You're not doing it because you are thirsting for closeness. You're not doing it because your heart is overflowing with love. You're not doing it because you need the other to know this, that, and the other thing about how you feel. You do it because the other needs. And the other's need is your driving force. You are driven to do for the other because the other has a need. And your bond with the other is such that all you need to know is that the other needs. That's all you need to know. More than that is superfluous. More than that is TMI. That's modern kid talk for too much information. Right? The favorite example is when the wife of the house says, I need purple curtains in the dining room. Okay. If that's what you need, then that's what you need. Then we'll get purple curtains in the dining room. The wife, in the opposite, yeah? When the man says, I don't know what guys need. What do guys need anyway? I need your undivided attention for the Dvar Torah at the Shabbos table. Okay, then that's what he needs. Are you interested in what he's saying? Sometimes. Does he know what he's saying? Sometimes he's prepared and sometimes he's not. But that's not why you're listening. You listen in response to the need. You are there because the other needs. To understand this idea more deeply and more perfectly, please go back and review the 2 lectures that we had from Rebbe and Katz, from Boca, because this was her message over and over and over. The best way to serve Hashem is simply to respond to his need. Truth is that even for us, regular old Beinonis and Beinonos. Beinonim and how do you say this? Beinonim and Beinonot. We are capable of this in this generation. You know why? Well, it's pretty interesting. A long, long time ago, every Jew could have been a prophet. Every Jew could have been a prophet. Every Jew could go to prophecy school, and after a four-year term, they would come out a prophet. Because every Jew was that spiritually sensitive. Then, on the weekends, every Jew was attracted to idolatry. Why? Because idolatry is rooted in some spirit, and those spirits were real, and those spirits were invested in their own lives, in their own sustenance. This we know. The way Hashem created the world is that Hashem created the spirit of impurity and made the spirit of impurity fend for itself, saying either you find customers or you're going to starve to death. Spirit of impurity. Because life comes from holiness, and Hashem is the source of holiness, and I, Hashem, am not giving life directly to you. Sorry, I'm going to have to go out in the world and find customers who will support you by their poor choices and sinful behavior. If you can find customers to sin and make poor choices, then you'll have life. You can siphon holiness, you can siphon holy life from them. I'm not going to give it to you directly. And so that's what the forces of evil in the world do. They run around looking for customers. And if you will give of your holy life to sustain and support unholiness, they will make you very happy. They will reward you, the forces of evil. That's why the wicked prosper for a short time. Yeah? If you have holy life to you and you're willing to share it with the forces of evil, then the forces of evil will give to you whatever they can possibly give to you from whatever they have. Whatever resources were designated to them by Hashem for this purpose, they will share until they don't need you anymore because you have no holiness left to you, and then they'll spit you out. But right. So the spirit of unholiness created by Hashem is a real spirit. And in the days when people were spiritually sensitive, if you would tap into the spirit of unholiness, you would get a really good buzz. You'd get a really good spiritual high. The fun kind that may or may not be followed by munchies. So people were attracted to everything spiritual. Because people were at that time spiritually sensitive, therefore they were attracted to anything spiritual. But the sages of the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, led by Ezra, the Kohen, prayed to Hashem that Hashem should please take the urge for idolatry away from the world, which Hashem did. But along with the spiritual sensitivity that makes idolatry interesting, Hashem also took away the spiritual sensitivity that made prophecy so prevalent. And therefore, prophecy is no longer a commonplace thing. Not only is prophecy not a commonplace thing, spiritual sensitivity is not a commonplace thing. Most people are spiritually dull. And you have to work very hard intellectually and on your emotions to develop a spiritual sensitivity. And even the best that we could muster in these generations will not touch the hem of the skirt of the people who lived in those generations. It just can't happen. But that's not all bad. Why? Since we are not spiritually sensitive, we are not burning up with a love and a feverish passion to be connected with Hashem. And therefore, it's not impossible for a simple Jew in our generation to do for Hashem and have zero kickback, have zero return. because a Jew these days can do a mitzvah and feel nothing. Is that perfect? What's the difference? You did a mitzvah, you fulfilled Hashem's need, and you got nothing for it. Is that bad? Far from bad. That's good. Is it perfect? It's probably not perfect. It's not perfect. But it's not any less perfect than the tzaddik who does mitzvahs because his heart is bursting with love for Hashem. A Jew who feels nothing, but in his mind, like we learned in the earliest chapters of Tanya, in his mind or her mind, he or she has concluded that Hashem is worthy of being honored, worthy of being revered, worthy of being loved, worthy of being served. And because of that conclusion, he or she does a mitzvah and in return receives and feels nothing. That's pretty good. That's pretty pure. Not very talented, but very pure. Very pure. And this is what the Baal Shem Tov this is what the Baal Shem Tov valued so much about simple Jews. The purity of the act, the simplicity of the act. It's not fancy, and it's certainly not self-serving. Okay, so now let's circle back. Here we have a tzaddik whose heart really is devoted to Hashem completely. Really, really is devoted to Hashem completely. And he does for Hashem with no consideration of his wants, his needs, and not in response to his heart's yearning. He's responding to Hashem's need. Hashem asked for a mitzvah, he does the mitzvah. Why Hashem needs it? The Alter Rebbe will tell us. We'll quote from Kabbalah Sfarim. But the tzaddik doesn't really care why Hashem needs. What good does our mitzvah do for Hashem? TMI. It makes no difference. He asked me for it, I do it. And I love to share this story. I had an opportunity to teach a high school class this year, the first semester. And at the end, there was one student, particularly bright and argumentative. Some of us know, some of us have children that are like that. Very bright and quite argumentative. So, the conversation went, for 4 months, back and forth. Hashem is asking for things, the benefit. Anyway, it always came down to a theological argument. But on the final day, I said, okay, we're going to set aside all of the psychological clothing of this discussion, and we're just going to talk like Jews. We're just going to talk like Torah. And Torah and mitzvahs and Hashem and a Jew, and the same question came up. But why? Why is this the right way? Why is this valuable? There are other paths, or maybe there are no paths. And an amazing thing happened. I took a shot in the dark. I didn't know the right answer, but I shared with this young man. I said, why is it valuable? Why is it important? Because it's yours. And he accepted it. He said, you know what? You're right. Why am I fighting this? This is what I am. I could just accept it as, even if it is imperfect, it's mine. This is what I got. This is the road for me. There's a great peace in knowing that this is the road for me. I don't have to know more than that. This is my road. This is my path. This is my God. This is my mitzvah. This is my responsibility. That's all I need. Let's go back to the Tanya, shall we? So the Alter Rebbe is saying that this tzaddik is called a elevated person because not only has he elevated himself completely beyond the reach of anything evil, but even the manner in which he does his mitzvahs is in an elevated way, meaning that it's not about him. It's not even about his soul. It's purely about Hashem. It's not only about cleaving to Hashem, which his soul desperately wants, in order to quench the thirst of his soul, Hashem, that is thirsting for closeness with Hashem, as the prophet instructed all those whose souls thirst for Hashem should go to learn Torah, as a thirsty man goes to find water. This was explained. All this we will explain later in chapter 40. Ella, rather, this tzaddik does for Hashem, like it says in Kabbalah in the Zohar, Ezehu Chassid. Who is a Chassid? Time out. What does Chassid mean? What's a Chassid? Originally Hasidim of today, we used to be called the Freiliche, the joyous ones, when compared to standard orthodoxy of the old country, which was very stern and severe and strict and regimented. Hasidim were known as the Freiliche, the happy ones, the jolly ones. But then we were given the title Hasidim. And although my friend Rabbi Bergstein from Detroit says that his grandfather once, his grandfather's not a chassid, and he was schmoozing with him, maybe it was his great grandfather, and Rabbi Bergstein, Avrami Bergstein, said to his grandfather, but the Misnagdim, the opponents of Hasidus, gave us our title. They called us Hasidim. And the grandfather said, no, we called you Chasudim with a sin. What? Because in some countries in Europe, there isn't an SH sound in the local language, and the Jews of that country cannot pronounce a shin, sh. They can only hiss with a sin. And so all of their prayers and all of their brachas and all of their Jewish stuff is missing the shin, the SH sound. So, like, for example, they would say to you, Good Sabbath, or they would say, Salom Aleichem, Salam Aleichem, or they would say, hello, my name is Sloime, instead of Shloime, instead of Shabbos and Shalom Aleichem. They don't have the SH sound. So the grandfather was saying, we called you Chasudim, with an SH, Chashudim, meaning the suspected ones, the alleged criminals. But it doesn't matter, because it came out as Chasidim, because they say it with a sin, and perhaps their U is pronounced as an E, like some European countries are. Anyway, the bottom line is, it came out as Chasidim. And Chasid is a persona that's described by the Talmud. There were people in the Talmudic times that were called Chasidim, right? There's a sefer from Rabbi Yehuda HaChasid, which is from the Chasidim of Germany of the I don't remember what it was, the 10th, 11th century, a group of people called Chasidim of Ashkenaz. So Chasid is an old title. In fact, Shlomo HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech, I believe. Oh no, sorry. The Arizal and Reb Chaim Vital, his Talmud, in describing the highest level tzaddik, they don't call him tzaddik gomor, complete tzaddik, they call him chassid. So who is this chassid? And why is he on the highest level? The answer is from the Talmud, because what is a chassid? Hamischased im koinoi im tandile. He is such a person who acts kindly, chassid from the word chesed. He acts kindly with his creator. Im kan delay. So the complete tzaddik acts only for Hashem. All of his kindness, all of his mitzvahs, that is, all of his worship, is an act of service and not in any way self-serving. Im kan delay with his nest. The Tikkunei Zohar explains the teachings of the Zohar by saying that the word kanoi, which is translated as creator, has another meaning. Koinoi, meaning his creator, could also be read as kanoi, his kan. What is a kan or a ken? It's a nest. The Tikkunei Zohar explains that a chassid is one who acts kindly with his nest, which is with the Shekhinah. Hashem's nest, so to speak, is the Shekhinah, the divine presence of Hashem on earth. And the complete tzaddik devotes his entire life not for himself, but for the sake of the Shekhinah. What does the Shekhinah need? Well, the Shekhinah is that part of Hashem's light that was invested in creation and is, so to speak, apart from Hashem and yearns to go home. This is Soid Golus HaShekhinah. This is the mystical secret of the Shekhinah's own exile, again, that we spoke about in today's Tanya portion. What does the Shekhinah need? To bring the sacred light of Hashem himself, not the light that was invested in creation, the original light of Hashem himself, the presence of the Creator himself. Let's take one step back. The presence of Hashem is here on earth called Shekhinah, but Hashem himself is not revealed in this world, and therefore the Shekhinah is felt. The Shekhinah feels apart from Hashem and yearns to be reunited, and we can do that through the performance of mitzvahs. Like it says in the Raya Mehemna, another part of the Zohar called Raya Mehemna, which means teachings from Moshe Rabbeinu, when it says, like a son who exerts himself for his father and his mother, whom he loves more than himself, more than his own nefesh, more than his own ruach, more than his own neshama, and everything of his own he considers as worthless, existing only to carry out the will of his mother and father. He would even be willing to die for them in order to redeem them from captivity, as explained elsewhere. That will be explained in chapter 41. So the tzaddik is called the B'nai Aliyah, elevated person, for two reasons. On the one hand, he has elevated his animal soul to holiness by avoiding the prohibitions of Torah, by despising everything evil, and he has also transformed the way that he serves Hashem, because now he serves Hashem in response to Hashem's need, not for any benefit to himself, spiritual or physical. And says the Alter Rebbe, really? And this is a classic Chabad Chassidus move, to take two different things and turn them into one thing. Because oneness is a primary value in Torah Chassidus. Here you have two divergent aspects in the life of the tzaddik. He has purified his soul, and he serves God in response to God's need. Says the Alter Rebbe, Ushneihem oilin bakone echad. Really, they both are the same thing. Ki al yidei habirudim shemevardim min loiga mailim mayin nukvin. Because by refining the impurity of his animal soul and his body and making them holy, he has caused a stir down below that will elicit a response from above. What is the response from above? If the darkness on earth is transformed into light, If the darkness on earth is elevated to holiness, then on every level of creation, something low is lifted up and united with something higher. Hashem responds. Every layer of existence responds to what happens on earth. When we do a mitzvah mitzvah means connection. We create a bond between holiness and the world. On every level of existence, a fresh bond is created between whatever is the lower level in that sphere and the higher level. New connections are made on every level. When the tzaddik purifies himself on earth, uniting that which is lowly about himself with that which is pristine and beautiful and holy about himself, he causes a response at every level, allowing new and fresh holiness to shine at every layer of existence. And the result is, when new connections are made, when new bridges are built, new light descends. Not only are lowly things elevated and bound up to higher things, but new light flows from the higher things into those lower things. And that means every layer of existence is experiencing a fresh revelation of godliness, of holiness. These energies are nothing other than the kindness, the light of giving that Hashem has implanted in each of the 248 commandments of the Torah. Because every mitzvah, every commandment, everything that the Torah tells us that we must do is an avenue through which Hashem can act kindly with his creation, meaning where Hashem can give more blessing, more light, more holiness. Each mitzvah is a channel for some kind of holiness, for some kind of kindness. A channel for holiness means it's a path through which the supreme light of Hashem is able to travel downward into the created worlds, even to be clothed in this physical, lowly world. All of this we will explain at great length in coming chapters 23, 35, and 37. So really, the tzaddik what is the tzaddik doing? The tzaddik refined himself, elevated his animal soul and his body. Why? It's an act of service to Hashem. The Shekhinah yearns to be reunited with its source. By doing the work on himself of purifying his soul and his animal, his body and his animal soul, the tzaddik creates, in the process, the tzaddik is creating new avenues for the holy light of Hashem to descend layer after layer, and even to enter this world and become attached with the Shekhinah that has been exiled to this lowest level, uniting Kudsha Brichu Shchinte, which is a tremendous act of kindness for Hashem, for the Shekhinah. And now we know all about the tzaddik. When we come back in Yetz Hashem, we'll talk about Rishoim, the different degrees of wicked. And it's not divided up quite the same way as the tzaddik is. And there's perhaps a lot more practical advice in there for us aspiring Beinonis and Beinonos than in these lessons about the tzaddik. Nevertheless, we have learned moral lessons from the tzaddik, and we should put all of them into practice with Hashem's help, and we will all improve our contribution. We will all increase our contribution to the coming of Mashiach and the illumination of this world with tremendous success and tremendous bracha. Thank you for joining. We'll shut the recorder and take questions.